Whether we realized it or not, until recently, we were all legally debt or labor slaves, as were our parents, our grandparents and great-grandparents before us. Since 1933 every new child born was required to be registered, thereby creating a corporate person, effectively denying that child any rights, as an owner of real property. The act of registering a child contracted them as chattel, and the birth record was a deceptive legal way of getting the parents to sign the baby away. The birth record was in fact a promissory note that was converted into a slave bond, which was then sold to a private reserve bank, effectively giving ownership of the child to the bank. Each new baby's contract was sealed by either a drop of their blood or by an ink impression of their foot onto the birth record. This signature was used to create their lifetime value, evidenced by their labor and the taxes and costs of that labor, as monetized currency, all designed to keep people in servitude for their entire lifetime. The banks have been the modern slave owners, and as the saying goes, he who owns the debt owns the people. The way the slavery system was imposed on us meant that, even if we did end up paying off our house or our car, we never actually owned it, because our right to any real property ownership was given away at the registration of our birth. This has been legal process since 1540 via something called a cestui que trust, and this was still in effect until the recent UCC rulings changed the legal landscape and reinstated the unrepeatable fact that no one can own ourselves or own our bodies. The slavery system remained intact for so long because of educational doctrines, the influence of our community at large, and because so many people accepted and embraced their slavery by waiting for others to help them or to tell them what they should or could not do. Enforcers like the police and courts made sure we stayed within the slavery system and incarcerated us if we chose to live as free individuals. In fact, the slavery system was imposed on us all and maintained for centuries by building walls in our minds through propaganda and conditioning, creating the false belief that we did not deserve better, that we were not part of a greater plan, and that we should instead be happy with the handouts, crumbs and indulgences given to us by the powers that were PTW, while the system itself reaped in millions of dollars every year, directly from the sweat and blood of our labor. But no more. Now you are free. To even begin to understand what has happened to the Republic, we must look backward in time to the period following the Civil War. We must go back to the year 1871, which was the beginning of the decline of the Republic. When we examine what happened during that time in our history, we begin to piece together this troubling, perplexing puzzle that is America. Only then should we answer as to whether we are indeed a free people or not. So, let's roll backward into the past for a moment. It is time we learned what they didn't teach us in school. It is far more interesting than what they did tell us. I think you'll stay awake for this lesson. The date is February 21st, 1871, and the 41st Congress is in session. I refer you to the Acts of the 41st Congress, Section 34, Session 3, Chapters 61 and 62. On this date in the history of our nation, Congress passed an act titled, An Act to Provide a Government for the District of Columbia. This is also known as the Act of 1871. What does this mean? Well, it means that Congress, under no constitutional authority to do so, created a separate form of government for the District of Columbia, which is a 10-mile square parcel of land. What? How could they do that? Moreover, why would they do that? To explain, let's look at the circumstances of those days. The Act of 1871 was passed at a vulnerable time in America. Our nation was essentially bankrupt, weakened, and financially depleted in the aftermath of the Civil War. The Civil War itself was nothing more than a calculated front for some pretty fancy footwork by corporate backroom players. It was a strategic maneuver by European interests, the international bankers, who were intent upon gaining a stranglehold on the neck and the coffers of America. The Congress realized our country was in dire financial straits, so they cut a deal with the international bankers in those days. The Rothschilds of London were dipping their fingers into everyone's pie, thereby incurring a debt to said bankers. If we think about banks, we know they do not just lend us money out of the goodness of their hearts. A bank will not do anything for you, unless it is entirely in their best interest to do so. There has to be some sort of collateral or some string attached, which puts you and me, the borrower, into a subservient position. This was true back in 1871 as well. The conniving international bankers were not about to lend our floundering nation any money without some serious stipulations. So, they devised a brilliant way of getting their foot in the door of the United States, a prize they had coveted for some time, but had been unable to grasp thanks to our founding fathers, who despised them and held them in check, and thus, the Act of 1871 was passed. In essence, this act formed the corporation known as the United States. Note the capitalization, because it is important. This corporation, owned by foreign interests, moved right in and shoved the original organic version of the Constitution into a dusty corner. With the Act of 1871, our Constitution was defaced in the sense that the title was block capitalized, and the word for was changed to the word of in the title. The original Constitution drafted by the Founding Fathers was written in this manner, the Constitution for the United States of America. The altered version reads, the Constitution of the United States of America. It is the corporate constitution. It is not the same document you might think it is. The corporate constitution operates in an economic capacity, and has been used to fool the people into thinking it is the same parchment that governs the republic. It absolutely is not. Capitalization an insignificant change? Not when one is referring to the context of a legal document, it isn't. Such minor alterations have had major impacts on each subsequent generation born in this country. What the Congress did with the passage of the Act of 1871 was create an entirely new document, a constitution for the government of the District of Columbia. The kind of government they created was a corporation. The new, altered constitution serves as the constitution of the corporation, and not that of America. Think about that for a moment. Incidentally, this corporate constitution does not benefit the republic. It serves only to benefit the corporation. It does nothing good for you or me, and it operates outside of the original constitution. Instead of absolute rights guaranteed under the organic constitution, we now have relative rights or privileges. One example of this is the sovereign's right to travel, which has been transformed under corporate government policy into a privilege, which we must be licensed to engage in. This operates outside of the original constitution. So, Congress committed treason against the people, who were considered sovereign under the Declaration of Independence and the organic constitution. When we consider the word sovereign, we must think about what the word means. According to Webster's dictionary, sovereign is defined as 1. Chief or highest, supreme. 2. Supreme in power, superior in position to all others. 3. Independent of, and unlimited by, any other, possessing or entitled to, original and independent authority or jurisdiction. In other words, our government was created by and for sovereigns, the free citizens, who were deemed the highest authority. Only the people can be sovereign, remember that. Government cannot be sovereign. We can also look to the Declaration of Independence, where we read, government is subject to the consent of the governed. That's supposed to be us, the sovereigns. Do you feel like a sovereign nowadays? I don't. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or a constitutional historian to figure out that this is not what is happening in our country today. Government in these times is not subject to the consent of the governed. Rather, the governed are subject to the whim and greed of the corporation, which has stretched its tentacles beyond the 10-mile square parcel of land known as the District of Columbia, encroaching into every state of the Republic. Mind you, the corporation has no jurisdiction outside of the District of Columbia. They just want you to think it does. You see, you are presumed to know the law. This is ironic because as a people, we are taught basically nothing about the law in school. We are made to memorize obscure factoids and paragraphs here and there, such as the preamble, and they gloss over the Bill of Rights. But we are not told about the law. Nor do our corporate government schools delve into the Constitution in any great depth. After all, they were put into place to indoctrinate and dumb down the masses, not to teach us anything. We were not told that we were sold out to foreign interests and made beneficiaries of the debt incurred by Congress to the international bankers. For generations, American citizens have had the bulk of their earnings confiscated to pay on a massive debt that they, as a people, did not incur. There are many, many things the people have not been told. How do you feel about being made a beneficiary of somebody else's massive debt without your knowledge or consent? Are we gonna keep going along with this? When you hear some individuals say that the Constitution is null and void, think about how our government has transformed over time from a municipal or service-oriented entity to a corporate or profit-oriented. We are living under the myth that this is lawful, but it is not. We are being ruled by a de facto, or unlawful, form of government, the corporate body of the death-mongers, the controllers. With the passage of the Act of 1871, a series of subtle and overt deceptions were set in motion, all in conjunction and collusion with the Congress, who knowingly and deliberately sold the people down the river. Did they tell you this in government school? I doubt it. They were too busy drumming the fictional version of history into your brain and mine. By failing to disclose what they did to the American people, the people became ignorant of what was happening. Over time, the Republic took it on the chin to the point of a knockdown. With the surrender of their gold in 1933, the people essentially surrendered their law. I don't suppose you were taught that in school either. That's because our real history is hidden from us. This is the way Roman civil law works, and our form of governance today is based upon Roman civil law and Admiralty maritime law, better known as the divine right of kings and law of the seas, respectively. This explains a lot. Roman civil law was fully established in the original colonies even before our nation began, and is also known as private international law. The government, which was created for the District of Columbia via the Act of 1871, operates under private international law, and not common law, which was the law of the constitutional republic. This is very important to note, since it impacts all Americans in concrete ways. You must recognize that private international law is only applicable within the District of Columbia and not in the other states of the Union. The various arms of the corporation are known as departments such as the Judiciary, Justice and Treasury. You recognize those names? Yes, you do. But they are not what you assume them to be. These departments all belong to the corporation known as the United States. They do not belong to you and me under the corporate constitution and its various amendments that operate outside of the constitutional republic. I refer you to the United States Code. Note the capitalization, indicating the corporation, not the Republic. Title 28, 3002, 15 ABC. It is stated unequivocally that the United States is a corporation. See note. Realize, too, that the corporation is not a separate and distinct entity from the government. It is the government. Your government. This is extremely important. I refer to this as the corporate empire of the United States, which operates under Roman civil law outside of the Constitution. How do you like being ruled by a cheesy, sleazy corporation? You'll ask your congressperson about this, you say? Congress is fully aware of this deception. You must be made aware that the members of Congress do not work for you and me. Rather, they work for the corporation known as the United States. Is this really any surprise to you? This is why we can't get them to do anything on our behalf or to answer to us, as in the case with the illegal income tax among many other things. Contrary to popular belief, they are not our civil servants. They do not work for us. They are the servants of the corporate government and carry out its bidding. Period. The great number of committees and subcommittees that the Congress has created all work together like a multi-headed monster to oversee the various corporate departments. And you should know that every single one of these that operates outside the District of Columbia is in violation of the law. The corporate government of the United States has no jurisdiction or authority in any state of the Republic beyond the District of Columbia. Let this sink into your brain for a minute. Ask yourself, could this deception really have occurred without the full knowledge and complicity of the Congress? Do you think it happened by accident? You are deceiving yourself if you do. There are no accidents or coincidences. It is time to confront the truth and awaken from ignorance. Your legislators will not apprise you of this information. You are presumed to know the law. They know you don't know the law, or your history for that matter, because this information has not been taught to you. No concerted effort has been made to inform you. As a sovereign, you are entitled to full disclosure of the facts. As a slave, you are entitled to nothing other than what the corporation decides to give you at a price. Be wary of accepting so-called benefits of the corporation of the United States. Aren't you enslaved enough already? I said above that you are presumed to know the law. Still, it matters not if you don't in the eyes of the corporation. Ignorance of the law is not considered an excuse. It is your responsibility and your obligation as an American to learn about the law and how it applies to you. They count on the fact that most people are too uninterested or distracted or lazy to do so. The people have been mentally conditioned to allow the alleged government to do their thinking for them. We need to turn that around if we are to save our republic before it is too late. The United States government is basically a corporate instrument of the international bankers. This means you are owned by the corporation from birth to death. The corporate United States also holds ownership of all your assets, your property, and even your children. Does this sound untrue? Think long and hard about all those bills you pay, all those various taxes and fines and licenses you must pay for. Yes, they've got you by the pockets. Actually, they've had you by the ass for as long as you've been alive. In your heart, you know it's true. Don't believe any of this? Read up on the 14th Amendment. Check out how free you really are. With the Act of 1871 and subsequent legislation, such as the purportedly ratified 14th Amendment, our once great nation of sovereigns has been subverted from a republic to a democracy. As is the case under Roman civil law, our ignorance of the facts has led to our silence. Our silence has been construed as our consent to become beneficiaries of a debt we did not incur. The sovereign people have been deceived for hundreds of years into thinking they remain free and independent, when in actuality we continue to be slaves and servants of the corporation. Treason was committed against the people in 1871 by the Congress. This could have been corrected through the decades by some honest men assuming there were some, but it was not, mainly due to lust for money and power. Nothing new there. Are we to forgive and justify this crime against the people? You have lost more freedom than you may realize due to corporate infiltration of the so-called government. We will lose more, unless we turn away from a democracy that is the direct road to disaster, and restore our constitutional republic. In an upcoming article, we'll take a closer look at the purportedly ratified 14th Amendment, and how we became property of the corporation and enslaved by our silence. I am saddened to think about the brave men and women who were killed in all the wars and conflicts instigated by the controllers. These courageous souls fought for the preservation of ideals they believed to be true, not for the likes of a corporation. Do you believe that any one of the individuals who have been killed as a result of war would have willingly fought if they knew the full truth?